Are penalties and interest tax deductible to your corporation? This is one area I see people get wrong very often. Now, before we can answer, we need to acknowledge that not all penalties and interest are created equal. It really depends on who's charging you. Now, as a general rule of thumb I like to use, and these all assume that the underlying expense is business related, and we're talking about deducting this penalty or interest in your corporation. If you're paying it to the government, that's probably not going to be tax deductible. If you're paying a private company, it's generally deductible. But this is easy to get wrong, so let's look at some examples to understand where the line is. And I'll tell you a small thing I like to do to make it easy for your accountant to get right at your end. So let's bring up the board. We have deductible and not deductible. First, CRA, corporate tax, interest, and penalties. That's an easy one. Not deductible. How about installment interest? Not deductible. Payroll, remittance interest, and penalties. Not deductible as well, but here there's a small exception buried here. So this is one to ask your accountant about. GST interest and penalties, not deductible. Alberta corporate tax interest and penalties, as well, not deductible. Those are pretty simple. Now, what about municipal parking tickets or fines for stuff like bylaw infractions? Not deductible. Parking tickets that you get from a private parkade operator, those are deductible. Now, what about speeding tickets? Not deductible. And here we're assuming that you're getting them from a city or provincial agency. Now, interest or late fees on supplier contracts, deductible. Late fees on utility bills, deductible. And here we're going to be assuming that your provider is a utility company and it's not the municipality itself. What about business credit card or line of credit interest? That one is deductible. Bank charges and NSF fees, that's going to be deductible. Lastly, what about some property tax late charges? Not deductible. And this one can be a bit tricky, but the way it's classified under Alberta municipal bylaws is this is seen as a penalty, so it's not deductible. Your exact municipality may vary, however, so ask your accountant, please, if you're not sure. Now, why does this question of deductibility for penalties and interest even matter? Well, there is a specific line on the corporate tax return which is meant for exactly this. And also, this is a type of expense that often it gets missed all too often in my personal experience. When your tax return is being prepared, and it really depends on how your bookkeeper or accountant has classified it, and if they've flagged it or not for your preparer. It's really easy to miss if that CRA interest is just lumped into a general interest and bank charges account. But if CRA reviews it, that deduction gets denied pretty fast, since unlike a lot of issues, this isn't really a judgment call or a gray area. It's pretty clear. And worst case, somewhat ironically, you'd be paying non-deductible interest and penalty based on CRA not liking how you've deducted a previous interest and penalty. So what should you do? I always like to have a separate account in the books. Whether you use Xero, QuickBooks, it doesn't really matter. But you call it something like non-deductible penalties and interest, which will make it much easier for your tax preparer to notice and to handle it correctly. Because accountants are just people, sometimes we miss things, so a separate account makes it easier to do the right thing. And lastly, I think it deserves saying the goal isn't to pay interest and penalties in the first place, but sometimes it happens. That's just life. If it's happening a lot or you have specific questions about items that I haven't covered, then I would say ask your accountant for that one. I really hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon.